EWTN.
I don't understand why I have to earn salvation.
1-833-288-3986.
What's stopping?
Why do I need to confess my sins to a priest?
What's stopping you? This is Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Tuesday edition of Call to Communion here on EWTN Radio. This is the program, you've probably heard about it. It's the show on a Catholic network for non-Catholics. How could that be? Well, that be because our foundress, Mother Angelica, always said we've got to speak out to everybody. She also said we need to always look at new media, and so that's why we do, that's how we do it. So if you've got a question about the Catholic faith, maybe you were a Catholic, active Catholic years ago, stepped away for whatever reason, maybe you've never been a Catholic, but you've got a question about the Catholic faith, and you really need to get that answer before proceeding any further. We can help you with that. Here's our phone number, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. If you're listening to us outside of North America, please dial the U.S. country code and then 205-271-2985. You can also text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for our response and then text us your first name and your brief question. Message and data rates may apply. And of course, you can always email us. We'll get to one of those in a moment. ctc@ewtn.com is the address. ctc@ewtn.com. Charles Beery is our producer, Matt Gabinski our phone screener, and Jeff Burson is on social media. If you want to ask a question via YouTube or Facebook Live, we are streaming there right now. Just ask your question via the comments box. Jeff will shoot that to us here in Studio One. I'm Tom Price along with Dr. David Anders.
Tom, how are you today?
Very well. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. Thank you.
Don't think we have gotten a lunch update from you in a while. What was it today?
Nothing too exotic, just lentils, brown rice, and a cara orange.
Ooh, that sounds pretty good.
It was good.
We're going to lead off here with an email. This is from Fernando, who says, Dear Call to Communion, having practiced my faith for over 40 years now, I wonder how we can be hopeful with respects to humanity. We always talk about people's ignorance of the moral life, sin, etc. How is it that so few people truly practice their faith? Regardless of where I live, apartment building or whatever, or work, I see very little participation of people living lives of grace and virtue. You just got to wonder if God asks too much of his people, as though the expectations are too high. What say you?
So, thank you. I appreciate the call. Your characterization of humanity, you would find that description written by Catholic writers in every age.
Nothing new.
That's exactly what the Desert Fathers would have said about their contemporaries. That's what Augustine wrote about his own parishioners. That's just the common lot of humanity. So it's not something that's unique to the modern world. And I would go even further. I would say that the difficulty is deeper than people not visibly participating in the rites of the Catholic Church. There are those who go to Mass and perform devotions and participate in the sacraments, whose interior lives are remote from the love of Christ. And that's also true. The real question is, why don't we do the one thing necessary that Jesus mentions in Luke chapter 10, which is to hear the word of God and live by it? Now, if it makes you feel any better, maybe it won't, I don't know. St. Paul had the same problem with his own converts. And, Paul wrote most of his letters to admonish a local congregation on something that it was getting wrong.
Mm.
And generally speaking, that meant putting something ahead of the one thing necessary, ahead of the life of active charity. And especially in the book of Ephesians, Paul recognizes that the transformation that needs to occur is more than just in the performance, that there needs to be a fundamental change of personality. So he writes in Ephesians chapter 3 that I pray that the eyes of your heart, well, Ephesians 1, he says, I pray the eyes of your heart may be enlightened. And then Ephesians 3, he says that you might, that Christ may dwell in your heart through faith, and you being rooted and established in love may have strength in your inner man to grasp how deep and wide is the love of Christ, and to know this love in a way that surpasses knowledge, to have an experiential awareness, so that Jesus comes and pervades your personality and suffuses your life with faith, hope, and charity, so you come to see the world as Christ does. That kind of transformation generally does not occur in individual lives without suffering. It's very easy to start the religious life and go through the motions and to receive the sacraments and to be able to recite your catechism and, to feel pretty good about yourself. You've got this thing together. Then you put on a few years and you get married and you have kids and, the mortgage payments come due and problems start piling up. And the next thing you know, like you're snapping at your wife and kids and, you're looking askance at things and life is just kind of falling apart on you. You realize I'm not the piece of perfection I thought I was. I really need some grace. And you get to the end of your rope and you die to yourself. You have a reconversion. That's necessary. The spiritual writers of the Catholic Church talk about the second conversion. There's a first conversion to the faith where you outwardly join the church, but then there has to be this kind of deeper death to the self, where you realize that the superficiality of things with which you've been contenting yourself is really not enough. Just like the rich young ruler who comes to Jesus in Mark chapter 10, and he says, "Tell me the way to be saved." And Christ says, "You already know the way." And the guy says, "Yeah, but I've done all that. I need something more." "Oh, okay, then come follow me."
Reminds me of my own walk with the Lord, joining the Catholic Church in 1992, I think it was, and but it was more of a pro forma thing than anything else.
Right.
And it wasn't until a few years later that I had that big conversion, as in, I've got to live this, and I've got to live it every day.
I find in my own Catholic life that I have those like with some regularity. Like that's what we have confession for.
Sure.
You just keep coming back to the well, and you keep renewing the vision, because you're human, and the world and the flesh and the devil draw you back in, and you have to draw yourself back out again.
Ain't it the truth? Appreciate that, and thank you so much for your question, Fernando. In a moment, we're going to get to the phones. We'll be talking with Bill in New England. We've got a line open for you as well right now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986, the Tuesday edition of Call to Communion here on EWTN. Do stay with us.
Wherever you are in the world, you can access the EWTN Global Catholic Network. It's everywhere. You can get EWTN's great Catholic programming on your car radio, at home on your TV, computer, or smart speaker. With EWTN's app, you can take EWTN everywhere on your phone or mobile device. If you want your news in print, turn to EWTN's paper of record, the National Catholic Register. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Christ is the answer, with Father John Riccardo.
I tell oftentimes an experience that I had at Divine Child when I was a young priest, 1 year ordained. First time I ever really saw the power of the Blessed Sacrament. And we simply exposed the Blessed Sacrament at the end of Mass one night. I encouraged people. I said, you know what, we've been in the habit of praying over people after Mass. I said, we're not going to do that this week. I'm just going to invite people to come on up and pray if they want to pray. And I put the Blessed Sacrament on the altar. I kneel down. As I kneel down, the church is in the sanctuary, the whole church. And as I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the people there, and I'm looking at Jesus under the appearance of bread there, I saw the Lord standing on the altar. And he's just standing there looking out at all the people. And then at a certain point, he turned towards me, and he just bowed. And he says, don't you see how easy this is? You don't have to do anything. You just have to put me out. You put me out, and I will work.
It's Called to Communion here on EWTN. Our phone number 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Don't miss the latest political and cultural reporting and analysis on topics of interest to Catholics, and all people of faith, really, on The World Over with Raymond Arroyo. And now, right now, you can get news from the world over into your email inbox every week. Sign up today by visiting EWTN.com. Click on the word subscribe. What'll happen there is it'll open up a whole menu of things that you can subscribe to. Just choose The World Over, and then you'll get those headlines and things of interest from the program. If you're ready now, let's go to the phones at 833-288-EWTN. We begin with Bill in New England, listening on the EWTN app, a free download. Hey there, Bill. What's on your mind today, sir?
Hi. I just know that I don't want to, but I have to snitch on some drug dealers up here because we have a problem up here in where we live, and I was wondering what does our Lord think about me being a snitch?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the question. So the desire for justice is one of the weightier matters of the law. And Christ commends to us the weightier matters of the law. Matthew 23, he got on the Pharisees' case because he said, you guys tithe mint, dill, and cumin. You handle the persnickety things, but you neglect the more important matters of the law, like justice, mercy, and faithfulness. But justice came first. Now, justice is wanting people to get what is their due, what they deserve. And for criminals, that is, you should want criminals to be apprehended and to face justice and to reform their lives. Now, there is a mechanism in society for doing that. It's the governing authorities, the civil authorities. Now, St. Paul writes in Romans 13, chapter 1, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities. For there's no authority except that which is God has established, and God has established these authorities, right? They're for the common good.
Yeah.
So it is a virtuous disposition to want justice to be done upon them, and it is a virtuous disposition for the civil authorities to do that, and not Batman.
That's right.
Not vigilantes.
That's right.
And your participation in the common good here is to alert the civil authorities that there is an injustice that needs to be rectified.
Yeah.
All right, so if you're concerned that you owe some sort of fidelity to these drug dealers and that it's an act of infidelity to snitch on them, I would tell you it is the exact opposite. You do owe them something. You owe them justice. Yeah. And justice means they stop dealing drugs in your neighborhood.
Absolutely.
So my advice would be go for it.
Bill, thank you so much for your call. And David, thank you for working in Batman. I'm personally delighted about that.
Yeah, all the pop culture references I can do, Tom.
There you go. That opens up a line for you right now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Let's go to JC in Fort Wayne, Indiana, listening on JC's Alexa device. Hello, JC. What's on your mind today, sir?
Hey, yeah, I find myself a Cradle Protestant that's mature in age, and I consider myself very eligible, single male. And in the Protestant church, I'm often feel pushed and even shoved towards marriage, to the point where it's beyond healthy suspicion and kind of being despised. But I've taken the Called and Gifted workshop, and I go to Mass on a weekly basis, and I don't know if the way I feel welcomed and esteemed in a church where the clergy are, obviously living chaste lives, is a good enough reason to uproot.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the question. Wow, this is a fascinating call to me.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. I really do. So I would say that you have found an affinity with an aspect of Catholic spirituality and discipline, namely the celibate lives of the clergy and religious, that does create social space in Catholicism for the single life, with a kind of respect and dignity that is often not afforded to it in Protestant congregations. And I know that of which you speak because I used to be Protestant, so I'm familiar with that. And I think that's extremely encouraging. And look, the celibate vocation of the clergy and religious is an inspiration even to the married. because to live a chaste life is difficult whether you're single or married. And so to think about the sacrifice of holy religious that I know and holy clergy that I know inspires me in the pursuit of chastity in my own marriage. So I think that's beautiful, and I think it's a wonderful reason to take an interest in the church. Now, if you become Catholic, you will at some point, either explicitly or implicitly, affirm everything that the Catholic Church declares to be revealed by God. So the Church teaches many things other than the discipline of clerical celibacy. It teaches a lot of things. And if you sign up for Catholicism, you're signing up for all of that. Can the celibacy of the clergy be a prompt to you, a motive to investigate the deeper claims of the Catholic faith? Absolutely, should be. Everybody gets drawn in somehow. For me, it was reading St. Augustine. For a friend of mine, it was the pro-life movement. Everybody has their point of entrance into Catholicism. Sure. If yours is the celibacy of the clergy, then have at it. That's a great reason to get interested. And you don't have to understand or be personally conscious of every Catholic dogma to become Catholic. You just have to have an implicit faith that Christ founded the church and gave the church the authority to teach and to do so without error. And so if you can swallow that proposition, that Christ founded this institution, that it is his church, and that it is the authorized magisterium, the authorized teaching office that Christ established for handing on the faith, that's sufficient. And you can work out the details as you go along.
All right. Abe, or JC, thank you so much for your call. It's Called to Communion here on EWTN with Dr. David Anders. If you have a question, do give us a call at 833-288-EWTN. If you call right now, we can probably get you on today's show, 833-288-3986. Here is Abe, listening in South Carolina on St. Paul Radio. Hello, Abe. What's on your mind today?
Hey, I have a 15-year-old son who we have discussions with regarding hell, and he has just a real sort of like a cognitive dissonance issue with, like, how could eternal punishment be a, like, kind of weigh in the scales with anything, like how could anyone deserve that kind of thing in this life, and so that's kind of my main question. He's a faithful young man, but he kind of commiserates with the kind of the atheistic way of thinking in that regard. How could that possibly?
Yes, sure. Thank you. I appreciate it. First of all, the difficulty he's not merely commiserating with atheists. He's commiserating with Catholics. Yeah. Right? Because the mystery of divine reprobation is just that. It's a mystery, and it escapes our rational awareness, like other dogmas of the faith. I can't wrap my head around transubstantiation or the Trinity any more than I can wrap it around the dogma of hell. So it's not a problem only for atheists, a problem for all of us. So ultimately, I cannot give you a sort of deductive, rationally certain answer that will resolve his discomfort. That's not possible, any more than I could do that for, say, the dogma of the Trinity. But I can throw in some qualifications that may help soften the blow a little bit. First of all, what is the point of proclaiming any dogma? Like, why teach dogma? Why not just teach ethics? I mean, that's a good question.
It is.
I mean, you don't ultimately need dogma to go to heaven. You need charity in your soul. There's an ethical reality that unites you to God, not a dogma per se. Well, the Catechism of the Catholic Church says that we have dogmas because they are lights, Lights, that illumine our path. They have existential relevance to us. They give us a point of reference to think about our activities, about our motivations, about the things that we contemplate. And so, before I engage that hell as a metaphysical reality, which I don't deny, but before I even raise the question of hell as a metaphysical reality, I want to engage the question of hell as an existential reality. Now, Father Emmerich Vogt, who's a Dominican priest with a great personality and wonderful sense of humor, said religion is for people who are afraid of hell, and spirituality is for people who have been there. Now, the context of the remark was he spent his life teaching and promoting a Catholic approach to the 12 steps of recovery from addiction. Now, if you have ever been an addict or you've known people that are addicts, you know the life of an addict is hell.
No doubt.
I mean, it's a spiral downward into a dark place in which you're alienated from everyone and every good thing and even from yourself. Well, that is a pretty decent picture of what hell is like. It's like the life of total alienation. And so before I address hell as a metaphysical reality, I have the capacity to experience a kind of hell in the depths of my own self-consciousness, right? As I alienate myself from the good, the true, and the beautiful and descend, in this downward spiral into this narcissistic self-regard that is utter misery. Now, a beautiful resource, in fact, you might want to read this with your son, that captures that aspect of hell as an existential reality is the allegory The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. And it's a great read. Go read it. And it's an allegory. It's a story of this breaks all kinds of rules with the metaphysics, but souls in hell get on a bus and go to heaven.
Okay.
And the rule is they can stay if they want to. The bus is going to go back to hell in a few minutes, and they can make their minds up whether they want to stay in heaven or go to hell. And the difficulty is that heaven hurts in a way different from hell. Hell wraps them into their own narcissistic self-regard. Heaven requires them to give that up. Now, the reward is everything. It's the place where all the beauty comes from, to quote another line from C.S. Lewis. It's everything. But you got to give up that narcissistic self-regard that we're all so deeply attached to. And addiction is a beautiful picture of that. The addict who knows that this thing that he loves is killing him. And we all have that. We're all addicted to ourselves in some respect, right? So the dogma as a light illumines my experience of myself because it's a picture of the self collapsed in on itself in that kind of narcissistic self-regard that cuts me off from everything good, true, and beautiful. And the alternative, the promise of eternal life, which I also don't have any rational experience of. I don't know what it means to have the beatific vision. I can't possibly. Eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has it entered the heart of man what God has in store for those that love him. So I don't know what the beatific vision is, and I can't rationally conceive it. But I can imagine it. And I can imagine this ever-deepening penetration into the good, the true, and the beautiful that so pervades my personality and my experience that reality itself becomes luminescent and glorious. And we get little tiny, tiny glimpses of that in our everyday experience. And, the smile of my baby or the little child that holds your hand, You have these little intimations of glory. And can I extrapolate and imagine an infinite universe of that experience in the fullness of God? That's something like what heaven is, I have these awarenesses, these dogmas in my mind because they illumine my experience and they aid me in the spiritual life. So that's point number one. Secondly, and also to take a page out of C.S. Lewis here, the Church's teaching on hell ultimately is that it's a chosen state. Lewis wrote that in the end there are two kinds of people, those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says, thy will be done. It's a chosen state, right? It's only volunteers in hell.
Right.
And then thirdly, we don't know who goes there. The Fatima prayer that we append to every rosary asks God to lead all souls to heaven. In the divine office of the Catholic Church, the liturgy of the Catholic Church, there's a prayer for the salvation of all souls. Now, as Bishop Barron rightly points out, it seems unreasonable to pray for that which we have no basis, in which we have no basis for hope. Why would the Church tell us to pray for something if it's hopeless?
Good point.
So we hope for the salvation of all souls, and we don't know who goes there. I'm not real optimistic about Judas.
That's good to know.
But I mean, apart from that, we don't really know what the population of hell is.
Okay. Abe, thank you so much. What a great question that was. Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders here on EWTN. As we go to break, a question now from Gabriel, watching us on YouTube today. Gabriel says, hi, just wanted to ask this. Is the theology of the body considered authoritative Catholic teaching? And can a Catholic disagree with it?
Oh, what a great question.
Yeah.
it is authoritative, and you can disagree with aspects of it. Both of those things are true.
Okay.
So the theology of the body is what we call the Church's ordinary magisterium. This is the Pope in the conduct of his day-to-day office trying to expound the faith and make it intelligible to people, right? You're under no obligation to believe that he did that in the best way possible. And I think personally that one can bring criticisms at his presentation. There are blind spots, the things he failed to say, things he could have said more clearly, ways he formulated his exegesis that I think might have fallen short of scholarly rigor. I mean, there are all kinds of things you could bring into dialogue and conversation with it. You don't have to just treat it like sacred scripture, no. But it's authoritative insofar as it's part of the ordinary magisterium of the Church. So it holds a place of prominence and importance, and it merits the religious submission of mind and will. That's what the canon law says, but not the assent of divine and supernatural faith the way a dogma would.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much for your question. In a moment, we'll get back to the phones here on EWTN's Call to Communion. We'll talk with Larry in Columbus, Ohio, Lauren in Massachusetts, Richard in Oregon, and looks like 2 or 3 lines open for you at 833-288-EWTN, 833-288-3986 for Call to Communion. Stay with us.
This is EWTN Catholic Radio.
St. Alphonsus Liguori made a vow to never waste time. He was a bishop, he oversaw a religious community, and he served people in need. He wrote about 60 books, and he'd write those books in little half-hour increments when he had the free time to do it. But for all his busyness, he would drop everything if someone needed to talk to him. And not just people who were a big deal, but anybody. And he'd have no problem spending an hour or two with somebody who just came by and needed his help. You see, he never saw wasting time on people as a waste of time. What a beautiful thing. I'm a really driven guy. I'm always going to the next task, the next project. I need to remember to stop. If somebody comes to my door, if a kid wants to talk to me, if a friend wants to chat, people come first. That's how Jesus did things. He didn't just preach to large crowds. He always had the time for the one, just like he does for you. Do you make that kind of time for people? This is Chris Stefanik from Real Life Catholic.
Want to be notified when Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders goes live on Facebook? Follow EWTN Radio's Facebook page and click the bell icon to be notified.
By providing quality programming faithful to the teachings of the Catholic Church, EWTN is television that viewers can trust. Whether it's films, documentaries, news coverage, lively discussion shows, or kids programs, we highlight the truth that is the eternal Word. For a complete schedule of EWTN television programs, visit EWTN.com and click TV. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Hi, this is Cy Kellett, host of Catholic Answers Live. Later today, 2 hours, open forum. Ask whatever you want. Catholic Answers Live, 6 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Call to Communion.
Hey, what's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? Let's talk about that here on EWTN's Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. Our phone number, 833-288-EWTN. One line open at the moment, 833-288-3986. All right, we're going to go to Columbus and talk with Larry, listening on the great St. Gabriel Radio. Hey there, Larry. What's on your mind today, sir?
You guys are the best. I just want to say I love David Anders, and you helped me get to the Catholic Church. I'm a convert, and I've been listening to you every day for the last probably 6-7 years. And I just found out that you're going to be in my home state and during Lent. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it or not.
That's fine. That's fine. You can say it.
Yeah. And I'm really hoping I get to see you. I love you and I appreciate you. And I know everybody else feels the same way. But my question is, the beatific vision we were just talking about a little bit, but we're supposed to be made in God's image, but then we try to get a picture of God, and how can we get a better, I know this is probably nothing we can answer correctly without, like you just said, you really don't know what the beatific vision is, but we're created in His image. So how do we get a better view or picture of what he actually looks like, or did look like, or how did he create us like we look?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the question. So, Catholic tradition on this is pretty clear that being in God's image and likeness does not mean that we resemble Him in our bodies, not in their shape. That is to say, God does not have a body. God's immaterial. And image and likeness traditionally has been understood in reference to the human intellect and the human will, our spiritual capacities to know the truth and to love it and act on it.
Okay.
Because God is infinite intellect and infinite love. And so we resemble Him in that way, particularly as we're reformed after the likeness and image of God. After the likeness and image of Christ, as we're reformed in Christ's image, we participate in the divine nature in a created manner, right, through grace. But in terms of conceiving God, you use the language of getting a picture of God, and that's actually the wrong way to go about it, okay? There are a lot of realities that we can describe and that we know are realities that we cannot by any means picture. And, you can think about subatomic physics, for example. You can read about abstract mathematical relations that pertain between subatomic particles, for example. You can describe them conceptually. By no means can you picture them. That doesn't make them non-existent. Even more so, here's another example. Here's a more, maybe easier to grasp example. I can picture a rectangle.
Yeah.
I can picture a particular rectangle. Mm-hmm. I cannot picture rectangularity. If I try to picture rectangularity, what happens? Well, I find myself thinking about a particular rectangle.
Every time.
It's impossible not to. But I can't. But that rectangle has particular qualities to it. It's so long. It has the angles. I mean the sides are this long, and that long.
Yeah.
It has some differentiating qualities to it that are distinct from rectangularity as such, which is a pure abstraction. I can't picture rectangularity, but I can conceive it. So imagination and intellectual or conceptual knowledge are not the same. And so I cannot picture God because there's nothing that the senses could lay hold of in God. But I can conceive of God. I can describe Him with certain definitions, such as God is the first cause or the first principle, right? Or God is metaphysically simple and without parts. I mean, these are things that I can conceive, but I can't represent them to myself in my mind in a picture.
Okay. Makes sense to me. And thank you, Larry, for your phone call and for your kind words about the show.
So March the 19th, from 8:30 to 3, St. Catherine's Catholic Church in Columbus, Ohio. That's what he's referring to.
Okay, very good.
So
March.
Yep.
All right.
March.
He will see you there, Larry. Appreciate your call. In a month.
Yeah.
Hard to believe. This year is just flying by. Call to Communion here on EWTN. Going now to Lauren in Massachusetts, listening on the great Station of the Cross. Hello, Lauren. What's on your mind today?
Hi. I just wanted to first say it's really an honor to speak with both of you. A couple years ago, I accidentally tuned into your show, and you had right at that moment spoken about addiction and what happens when a person passes away from an overdose. My brother had just passed away. I think it was that day. So since then, since then I dove right into EWTN and listening to your show, and so I've bought books. I haven't read them all. I'm going through the motions, but I keep waiting for something to is there anything that could shake your religion? Like, is there anything that at this point, I'll purposely search really smart people who who are Catholic, or like why smart people aren't Catholic or something kind of crazy. I just feel like I keep waiting for the shoe to drop and
yeah, Lauren,
I get it. I
yeah,
get it.
Yeah. Is there some particular aspect that's holding you back, Lauren? Is there something or
It just seems too good to be true.
Yeah. Oh, I totally get it. And when I was coming into the Catholic Church, I remember being exactly where you were, psychologically, precisely where you were. And I remember having the realization, why am I not Catholic? And I knew what it was. I wanted there to be some additional fact that I could acquire that would compel my will to believe. Or rather, I should say that would compel my intellect to accept the truth of the faith.
Okay.
Where coming into the Catholic Church was not so much a choice, but was something that was impossible for me not to do because the evidences for its truth were so overwhelming and compelling that to act in any other way would be profoundly irrational. I wanted to have that level of certainty about the faith before I became Catholic, and I was sort of waiting around for that to happen. And then I stumbled on St. Thomas, who was the most supremely rational person that ever lived on the planet from Adam till the end of time. I mean, Thomas had an intellect second to none. And yet when Thomas addressed the question of the rationality of faith, which he clearly believed the faith was rational, his definition of faith was that faith is an act of the will commanding the intellect to believe on insufficient evidence. Not no evidence, but not enough evidence to make the faith compelling in the sense that I cannot refuse my consent. And the Church, the First Vatican Council, actually taught as a dogmatic truth. This is one of the things you hold as a Catholic, is that though there is evidence for the Catholic faith, the evidence by itself is not sufficient to compel the will. So there is a choice that one makes to accept the credibility of the evidence as sufficient, in the same way that I would accept the credibility of my wife's testimony. I trust my wife.
Sure.
If she calls me up and says, I can't get the kid from carpool this afternoon, you need to go to the school and pick him up, I'm not going to try to independently verify the truth of that statement. You know, yeah. I'm gonna take her word for it and go, because she's trustworthy and reliable. And the act of faith is like that. That I acquire sufficient evidence that the claims of the Church appear credible to me, and it's reasonable to take them, listen carefully to what I say, it's reasonable to take them on authority. It's not a blind authority. It's not a leap in the dark a la Kierkegaard. All right? It's not fideistic. It's not without reason. But it's a decision to entrust myself to a way of life because I know this much. I know that the way of life presented by the Church is salvific. And that's obvious. I mean, to anyone who's studied the issue, that much is clear. The Catholic way of life is salvific, and it brings people to sanctity when they live it with generosity. And all the historical claims of the Church cohere around that central fact that in the end, three things remain: faith, hope, and charity, but the greatest of these is love, right? Cardinal Ratzinger wrote an address that he delivered at the Sorbonne to a highly hostile audience of academics, French academics, many years ago, 1980s, I think, called The Truth of Christianity. And he basically came down on two propositions, right? One was that there is a truth and that we can rationally ascertain truth. Right? That's a commitment that you make as a Christian, that there is an intelligible reality that is open to us. There's a truth of the fact.
Yeah.
And I'm adequate to get what it is. And secondly, that love corresponds to the fundamental meaning of the universe. That at the end of the day, the universe is benevolent. The whole show has a reason, and it's tied up with the reality of love. And I think that second proposition, there are all kinds of evidences for that in our own experience, in the resurrection of Christ, the miracles of the saints, and so forth. But that is a faith commitment. I mean, you can bring contrary evidence. You can argue the universe is not benevolent. The reality of evil overwhelms, any claim to God's goodness. I mean, I could existentially orient myself in the world as a cynic. And in fact, that's a very easy thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But the consequences for that are dire, not only in eternity, but now. Like,
you'd be miserable.
My life is materially worse when I am a cynic. And when I'm open to the possibility of truth, goodness, and beauty, right, which coalesce around the central concept of love, that's salvific. That's transcendent. That's anagogical. It draws me up out of my narcissistic self-regard and opens me up to the beauty of everything, right, and fills me with hope.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of motivations that bring one to accept the central truth claims of the Catholic Church. Now, within that, there's room for endless qualification. And it's very important. Catholics are not fundamentalists. We're not literalists about texts. We approach these for their transformative power because of how they affect us in our lives. This is what we call the spiritual sense of the sacred text. And theologians can disagree with one another, and we can argue about the metaphysical details, and you have different schools of thought, of spirituality, of theology. All that's allowable, all right? But they all come to serve this central concern, which is the salvation of souls through the pursuit of the charity of Christ.
God bless you, Lauren. Thank you so much for your call. We'll be praying for you along your journey. Call to Communion here on EWTN. Tom Price reminding you to join us tomorrow morning for Women of Grace. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern. And Sue Brinkman will be along because it's Wednesday. She will be doing her Wacky Wednesday show. And tomorrow she'll be discussing her book on mindfulness. This is a term that is bandied about these days. What were we talking about when we're talking about mindfulness? You can find out all about it on tomorrow's program, Women of Grace, at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Before we go back to the phones, a quick shout out here to a couple of our radio station family members. His Mercy Radio, KJCR in Grants Pass, Oregon, celebrating their 7th anniversary this week. Congratulations to you, Connie, and your great team there. Also, St. Valentine Radio, KDJW in Amarillo, marking, 16 years with EWTN. And, of course, Athens Catholic Radio, WXPB in Athens, Georgia, now celebrating 5 years of solid Catholic radio. Congratulations to these great stations from all of us here at EWTN. Back to the phones right now. Here is Richard in Oregon, and we're going to go to him. He's listening online, EWTN.com. Hello, Richard. What's on your mind today, sir?
Well, the problem that I have is I'm Catholic. My wife is baptized Catholic, but she goes to Protestant church. And I go to a Catholic church, and she says that when she goes to the Catholic church, she doesn't feel as welcome as when she goes to her Protestant church. When she goes there, she said people come up and say hi, and greet her, shake her hand and stuff. It's just like more open and stuff. And anyhow, that is my problem, and I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of convince her to just go to the Catholic church.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the question. Well, I don't doubt that what she says is true. I mean, I know a number of people have had that experience.
Sure.
And it's built into the culture of the respective institutions. Catholics, for one reason or another, are more oriented towards attending liturgy in pursuit of their own private devotional aims and receive the sacraments, and they're less oriented towards communal activities at the parish on Sundays. That's just part of Catholic culture, kind of an unfortunate part of Catholic culture, and I think it doesn't have to be that way.
I think we've got a lot to learn about fellowship.
Sure, it doesn't have to be that way,
right.
But that's kind of a relic of history, and we need to work on that. So I don't doubt that that's true. In terms of one's motive for becoming Catholic, the motive for becoming Catholic is not principally that the people in my parish are nice. I hope my people in my parish are nice, but that'd be a sorry reason to become anything, to be honest with you, because it's dependent on the people. Mm-hmm. And my interest in Catholicism is because it unites me to Christ through 2,000 years of history and tradition and the sacraments. I mean, that's ultimately my motive. This is a church that Christ founded, and the Catholic Church has the fullness of the truth about divine revelation and the means of grace, right? And it presents to me a path of holiness that can include robust, warm human friendship, but is not reducible to those realities. Okay. Now, in terms of what do you do with your wife, I'd probably stop trying to persuade her, because that's probably going to backfire on you, right? If someone else might persuade her rather than her husband, but we tend to push back against the people in our own family, right? When they tell us we have to do something,
you think
we're like, oh yeah, you want me to show you what I have to do, right, buddy? And so I would suggest instead, work on exemplifying the virtues that she finds lacking in Catholicism. And that would include, maybe you've got Catholic friends. Develop your own Catholic social life. Draw her into the orbit of that social life so that she finds herself welcomed by Catholic people. Rather than telling her that Catholic people can be welcoming, show her.
Hope that's helpful for you, Richard. Appreciate your call. Here it's Call to Communion on EWTN Radio. Let's go to Pittsburgh right now. And Susan, listening on Sirius XM, Channel 130. Susan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, thank you. I called once before about my sister. She's a Buddhist, and she recently found out that she was diagnosed with cancer. So I told her that I would be praying for her, and that, she might find comfort as I do in reading the Bible and drawing closer to Jesus. And she went ballistic, of course, and didn't talk to me for a while. And now she sent me a message that she's ready to be my friend again and talk, and that she forgives me. And I was like, I don't even know how to respond to that, because I don't have anything to apologize for.
Yeah, thanks. So do you think that I appreciate the question. Do you think she took offense that you were praying for her, or that you recommended that she draw close to Jesus? Or both?
Well, I think both, because she called me an evangelical fanatic. And I was like, what?
Yeah. So a couple thoughts occur to me. I'm a fairly kind of hobbyist student of American Buddhism, because I see that it is a cultural phenomenon that I have to engage.
It's a thing, yeah.
It's a thing in the world. It's kind of like, I know a lot about Protestants, so I can dialogue with Protestants. I've read and studied an awful lot about Buddhism in antiquity and the present, so I can dialogue with people who call that are Buddhists. So I know a thing or two about it. And one of the things that strikes me as funny about your sister's response is it's not characteristic at all of many of the people that would represent themselves to be Buddhist leaders in the world today, right? So a lot of them pride themselves on, at least with their public face, of trying to present a kind of ecumenical sensitivity, right? And I'm thinking about characters like Thich Nhat Hanh or the Dalai Lama or Robert Thurman, all of whom would have welcomed Christian prayer on their behalf. It was characteristic of their ethos to say, like, hey, you do your thing, I do my thing, and we'll all just get along and sing Kumbaya, and it'll be great. That's very characteristic kind of the public face of world Buddhism today, is to present this sort of ecumenical front. And I've even heard Buddhists make the claim that, prayers to Jesus, well, they're really just going to Avalokiteshvara, the Tibetan bodhisattva, right? So what they count, in other words, they have a way of accommodating it to their own tradition that is more generous than that. So it seems uncharacteristic and certainly not very charitable of her to bristle so much at this display of goodwill on your part. In terms of your own response, you're right. You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. But probably the best way to advance your relationship with your sister is not to insist on that point, right?
Yeah.
Love, St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13 that charity bears all things, including the slights and indignities that narrow-minded people hurl our way.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate that. Susan, thank you so much for your call. David, I wish you had not said Bodhisattva. Now I've got that Steely Dan song. It's going through my head, man. I can't get it out. All right, back to the phones. Here is Rob in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Rob is listening on the great Holy Family Radio. Rob, what's on your mind today?
Thank you. My question is, I read someone the other day was trying to discredit the Apocrypha being in the Bible by the fact that when Jesus talked about this, the blood of the prophets will be required by this generation from Abel to Zechariah, and that didn't include anything in the Apocrypha. Apparently there must have been prophets that were left out because he didn't talk about them, and they said therefore Jesus was dismissing it.
Yeah, right. I understand that argument. So Christ says this in the book of Luke, chapter 11, verse 51. Is Luke 11:51 sacred scripture?
I would say yes.
Well, what would your friend say? Would he say that he would say Luke? Okay, well, Luke 11:51 that he's citing in defense of his argument is not included in this canon that he alleges Christ is referring to. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so on what basis does your friend point to the book of Luke as canonical scripture, since Christ himself didn't reference it as such? He's not going to have an answer for that question, right? He's not going to have an answer for that question. So the rule that he's proposing for determining the canon of the Bible is not sufficiently broad to include the book of Luke. So he is engaged in a performative contradiction.
Okay. Does that make sense to you, Rob?
Couldn't it just be that Jesus was talking about from before his time that he was on the earth?
No, I understand the argument. The argument is that Christ is referencing a canon of the Bible. He's referencing a specific canon that does not include the Apocrypha. And the reference from Abel to Zechariah implies that. And I'm saying, my argument is that completely misses the point about how we construe canonicity, right? If the only way we can know what the canon is because Christ refers to it, well, that would exclude all of the New Testament, because Jesus doesn't refer to any book of the New Testament. So that's just not how we know what the canon is.
It wasn't written yet, for one thing.
Well, yeah, but whether it was or it wasn't, there are a lot of biblical books that Jesus doesn't mention.
Of course. Got it. Rob, thanks so much for your call. Here's an email we received from Peggy. And first of all, she says, thank you for this deep well of Catholic teaching and example. My question is on indulgences. Given that absolution has been granted by the priest and assigned penances have been carried out, please explain the temporal punishment owed to divine justice. What did our assigned penance accomplish? If there is no objective assurance when or if temporal punishment owed to divine justice has been satisfied. Thanks, Peggy.
Well, maybe it got you out of purgatory.
Ah, could be.
Maybe it got you out of purgatory, right?
Yeah.
So, if you perform your penance with generosity and contrition, and not just the act, but the virtue of penance attached, then perhaps it very well will get you out of purgatory.
Okay. Well, that is Peggy. Thank you for your question. We'll probably go out with this one from Mark. Some Protestants see Matthew 12:46 and the following as offsetting the wedding of Cana narrative. On the one hand, Mary is the star at the wedding at Cana, and then they say she and Jesus' brothers sort of bungle it when they think he's gone off the rails in Matthew 12. They play these two passages off each other as a way of saying Mary has her good days and bad days, just like everybody else. Therefore, it is just like everybody else. Comments?
Yeah, Matthew 12 does not display the Blessed Virgin Mary in a negative light at all. At all. The point of the text is entirely different, namely that it is not biological affinity that counts one a member of Christ's inner circle. That's the point when Jesus says, "These are my mother and my brothers and my sisters," pointing to the disciples.
Uh-huh.
He's establishing that to be in Christ's inner circle is not a matter of biological affinity, and of course it isn't.
Okay. And that's where we're going to leave that one. And here's one more as we're at the door here, a text from John. Scripture clearly teaches that Christ chooses people to be saved based on grace alone. Gibbon's Romans 11:5 and 6. How can grace be in any way earned through works? If grace is not by works, how can Catholicism teach salvation by merit?
Okay, thanks. So the Catholic Church actually teaches that Christ dispenses grace to people gratuitously, and that we cannot earn the gift of grace. That is actually Catholic dogma, right?
Okay.
But having been given grace, we can in fact cooperate with it, and in doing so, we can merit reward. So that's why Christ teaches explicitly things like, if you pray to your Father in secret, your Father who sees you pray in secret will reward you.
Mm-hmm.
If you give alms in secret, your Father will reward you. If you fast in secret, your Father will reward you. I mean, the promise of reward for specific concrete acts of virtue is ubiquitous in the New Testament, and in fact becomes the basis for Christ's judgment in Matthew 25 at the end of time. Whether or not you have performed acts of mercy will determine your eternal state. Now, can you do those acts of mercy without grace? By no means. Got to have grace to do them. But if you cooperate with grace, you can in fact merit. That is explicitly the teaching of Jesus.
John, thank you for your text. Dr. David Anders, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Tom.
Remember, we do this program Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, with an encore at 11 p.m. Eastern. On behalf of our fantastic team, I'm Tom Price, along with Dr. David Anders. Looking forward to our next visit tomorrow, right here on EWTN's Call to Communion. You have a great day, and God bless.